going to create a giant canvas that's sort of a sculptural object, meets a painting, meets a performance, and showcase it in a video. So what does that mean? Basically, I found a giant canvas at the dumpster in the community that I live in yesterday in the rain, so the canvas was actually cleaned off, but the back of it is sort of broken. It wasn't stretched that well, so the flops are a little bit loose. One of the corners had some canvas added. I'll show you in a moment. So immediately I'm thinking about it in terms of its sort of deconstruction. It's on the way out, and yet it was never used. So it's both this possibility, opportunity, life, and yet at the same time sort of broken, found at the dumpster. And how do you kind of bring that life while also honoring its deconstruction and not trying to cover up the fact that it's imperfect? So immediately I thought about ways to kind of break through or tear or sort of intentionally bring out that deconstruction. And then I just remembered that I went to this amazing show at Hauser Wirth in LA that was showcasing Lucio Fontana's work. And he was one of the first spatial artists. So essentially, he began to he took two-dimensional canvas and turned it into something that was an art object. It wasn't necessarily sculpture, and it wasn't really a painting. And eventually he sort of extended this in a more environmental way, especially using light. So in his early work, he took canvas and he would puncture them in a way that kind of pierced through and was in some sense performative. There's the action itself and the making, but it was creating this sense of possibility outside of just viewing within a two-dimensional way. He also became really known for the slashes that he would use, where he would sort of meditate on a piece and create these slashes that were almost like a pathway or an entrance into a sort of infinity. It's as if the two-dimensional became this way of coming through into something more experiential. And so that embodied element was represented in this two-dimensional yet not two-dimensional way. He also did works with these punctures, with rocks and with objects, and when you put light on those pieces, they create shadows and a depth that's sort of ephemeral and felt and not required to be experienced through this flat painted dimension. So he kind of began to experiment with light in this way, and he also created these spatial environments and used neon. And so yeah, I really look up to him as someone that thought about the visual landscape in this really experiential way and brought the canvas beyond just the canvas into this sort of performative yet sculptural yet spatial embodied experience. And no one was really doing that at the time. He was also, I believe, either working with or inspired or had conversations with Yves Klein, sorry, art historians out there, who was painting bodies and using the body with paint as sort of like a brush stroke around the canvas. And so I like this idea of taking this canvas that's sort of already within this deconstruction and bringing that sculptural performative element to it. I also have done a lot of work tracing my body and painting my body with canvas or photographing that or various projects. So the thought is to explore the canvas itself and kind of feel it out, and then to potentially trace my body along the canvas, or almost like Da Vinci, kind of creating strokes of movement and relating the body in motion and performance onto the canvas, and maybe using some paint and some spray paint and creating those layers. And then playing with puncturing or slashing, or ways that the body and movement are almost like a pathway of extension beyond just the canvas itself. So yeah, this is all just an experiment, and let's see what happens. Okay, so real quick, before we get too deep into the process, let's watch a clip of the video to see what happens. Okay, so here's the piece of canvas, and I just laid it down, kind of felt it out, and I feel like in the same way that Lucio had that meditation and created that single slash, I kind of want to offer that direct simplicity. So I want to begin with just an outline of the body and kind of holding that same sort of symmetry, and then extending from there. When it goes on the ground is maybe when there's paint poured or whatever happens, but I think the direct simplicity of the body outline is where I want to begin. interesting discoveries in process is the black was really playing with these extensions within the symmetry of the body, and then kind of stepping back and finding those points of connection with circles, flipping the canvas, because the canvas is taller than my body, so wanting to think about how to fill both ways and using a different color to show that change. And then that moment where the arm just kind of is playing with an extension here and the arm is playing with an extension here, that's not necessarily a trace of the body form, but just showing those points of contact in that symmetry, which actually kind of makes me think of those perforations, where those places that you can kind of hit that are still in some way connected to motion or to length or part of that symmetry, and yet they're just shown within those perforations versus the actual full fluidity of the body. So I don't know if that makes sense to anyone else, but I find it interesting. So I really love the idea of cycles and continuous birth and death, which is both the objects that I find that I end up incorporating into art, but also just the cycles that we go through individually, collectively. And so I kind of want to speak to circles and energy body centers, which energy kind of cycles in its own circle. So something about this makes me think about energy systems and chakras and stuff like that. So I kind of want to explore what it feels like to come in contact with those different circular energy centers in the body. Flow of movement and lines of the body, and I like keeping the canvas kind of minimal, working with just these three colors, which sort of feel like in some ways blood, the way that your veins are and your blood is blue before it hits oxygen is red, and this kind of black base outline. So I'm going to create some more simple outline shape with spray paint and go from there. Okay, so here's what we have so far. It's hard for me to keep it minimal, which is what I want to do because I love to just like paint and groove. But I really like that there's this sort of like head, chakra center, kind of your gut. It almost feels like a rib cage And going down, this is like second chakra. That was pretty much like even with my like hips, and then finding those extensions of the knee in the yellow. So even when it's spotted or kind of these circles or dots, it's sort of actually still outlining this like energy flow of the body and these different centers. So I'm going to pull it off the wall and go from there. Okay, so here's the piece so far, and I really like that it's minimal in its color. I really dig primary colors or having just a handful of bold and simple colors layered. And I want to create some sort of circular shape, both because of these energy centers and thinking of the cycles of everything, the continuous birth and death of things, spirals, all of that. And also Lucio Fontana did a lot of works that were egg-shaped with this same kind of reference and idea. So I want to honor him in that way. And I'm going to use white actually, so maybe isn't noticeable, but just like a lot of these cycles, the way this was at the dumpster and went through the rain and someone stretched it, and who knows where it was before that, or just the experience of the body meeting it, and all these ways that these cycles and experiences are built into objects in a sense, and yet go unseen. Creating this sort of circular, but using white, is referencing that kind of continuous and yet not always conscious cycling that's taking place. Okay, so here's what we have so far. We have this sort of egg shape reference to cycles and spirals and Lucio Fontana. We have this sense of the energy centers and extension of the body. We have these different sort of like bloodlines of blue and red, and also light and energy. The yellow makes me think of that extension, light. The red makes me think of something more grounded and down. So in some ways, this is sort of the form. You can see almost like the hips and the legs and the head moving out and extending beyond. So hopefully the canvas has a feel of movement and energy and flow within it. And now I want to play with these perforations, which for this, I don't know what this is going to look like because I've never done it before. Yeah, I think I'm just going to meditate in front of the canvas and see what happens. Let's do it. Okay, so maybe I forgot to press record when I did the first 2 slits, but it's okay because you would have just seen me staring at the canvas for a long time. But what I discovered was feeling the place of my hands and the energy from my hands, just kind of wanting to like slice into that. So I created these. And then immediately that passageway really does feel like a passageway. So now I want to play with my body, being behind there and seeing what happens. Moment for what it is, and I think I'm going to put on some kind of outfit, something kind of simple, and maybe do some movement in front of the piece and just feel myself a little bit, feel the energy flow of it, and edit some of those pieces in with close-up pieces of just the piece itself to create a relationship between the making of it, the performative aspect of it, and the movement of the lines and the piece itself, so that it becomes this video representation of this art object. Okay. So I'm realizing I've been wearing this the whole time. I took off the yellow shirt because I got paint on it and just wiped it down, but maybe I just wrap yellow chain around this, and that way when I edit it with the process of it, it's kind of more natural, and I can also maybe show some hand movement coming in and out of the canvas and use the chain around my hands, so it's less about the full body and more just about chain and hand and movement. So
we'll work with that.
Okay, so I have this plastic yellow chain and yellow rope, and I'm officially obsessed with this rope. I want to do 1 million canvases and have rope partially coming through, and then laid out in awesome patterns across the ground as an installation. So that's something to interact with. And then with the yellow chain, I just kind of created this shape on my body that can also kind of weave and be alive and go through the piece. So let's see what happens. So thanks for joining me on this journey, because it's always a journey. I'm actually really excited about what happened today. I feel really inspired to continue integrating the body movement lines with materials. The slit is a passageway. It's like a whole new dimension just broke through. I've been using materials that are clear or maybe have cutouts or holes, but this is the first time I really explored that sensation of cutting in the way that we did today. So and the rope, and more cutting and more canvases to come. I'm inspired. I hope you're inspired too, and I hope that it inspires you to actually just kind of look around the things that you find in your space and play with how you can interact with them and how you can find the beauty in them and what you can do from there. So thanks for watching.